Hey, good afternoon or good morning, depending on what time you're watching this. It's Shawn Casemore with another 10-minute sales multiplier. Today, I want to talk to you about what I refer to as the power pause. Now, there's a reason I give it this name, but let me tell you the true origin of how this came about. Early in my career, I was selling different componentry. So I would go in and visit businesses, and specifically individuals, executives, operational individuals, and folks, even procurement individuals within these companies. And we would have ongoing conversations. And invariably, if there seemed to be a fit or they were looking for some other options, I will put together a quote, send that quote through, usually via email, or sometimes we would mail it. Then I would go and attempt to visit the prospect in person to review the quote and, of course, try to close the business. So early on in this career that I had my first opportunity to quote, and I was able to close the business, right? Which is good. It allowed me to keep my job. But about the third company I quoted, and we've been having some ongoing conversations, I sent the quote through. I booked an in-person meeting to review. I showed up for the meeting. And the meeting went as it had the previous couple of times. They had some questions about the quote that I was able to answer. And then it happened. The prospect looked at me and they said, Shawn, what would happen if we decided to forget about your quote and just buy this from your competitor? And so the question caught me off guard. I really wasn't prepared for it, which is why you should, by the way, run through some questions in your mind before these meetings, which I did from that day forward. But nonetheless, it was such an odd question. I mean, if they're going to use the competitor, why would they tell me that in this meeting? What was their whole point? And these are the questions that started to go through my mind after he asked the question. So invariably, he said, Shawn, what would happen if we decided to buy this component from your competitor? So immediately I'm thinking, wow, what an odd question to ask. And well, probably not much would happen other than we wouldn't have a relationship together. I wouldn't close this business. I wouldn't get my commission check, right? But then I'm thinking, how do I respond to this? Do I give a provocative response and say, well, that's exactly what you should do? Because no, it's not what you should do. You should buy from me. Do I answer honestly? Well, if you don't buy this, then I'll continue to try and maintain a relationship and convince you that we are the better product. We are the better company to work with. So again, a lot of questions were filling my mind, but to the prospect, this is, I'm guessing, what they experienced. It was me sitting in silence, staring at them. So like this. Now, it was a little bit longer than that, but you notice how that gets a little bit uncomfortable. And for those of you just tuning in, you probably thought there was a glitch in the internet. That is not. That was me pausing on purpose to demonstrate what happened during early in my career, a meeting I had with a prospect right before I was attempting to close. But to the prospect, what they saw was me looking directly at them and not saying a word. Now, this isn't going to work every time, but in this instance, the prospect turned to me as I was staring at them and they said, look, Shawn, I'm just joking around. We're going to go ahead with this. I just wanted to see what your reaction was. And then we closed the business. Okay. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that's what's going to happen. However, after this, I reflected on the meeting, which you should always do. After any meeting, whether it's a successful meeting or not, always reflect. What could I do differently? What could I learn from this meeting? What should I replicate in my future meetings? And what I was able to really come up with is that, when I paused to them, it was probably a very long silence. And for some people, silence is difficult to deal with. So they'll tend to jump into that silence and say something. And what I started to do was for myself, test this pause on purpose during the closing conversation. There wasn't always the opportunity to bring it up, but sometimes there was, and I would just pause. So it would be when the prospect would ask me a question, sometimes an odd question, but sometimes just a straight up question. I would pause much longer than I normally would, typically to the count of 3, such as 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. I've even pushed it to 5. But what I found almost every time is the prospect would jump in first. They'd say something, and they never brought up anything about it being an odd response on my part, the silence. It never came up. So I started asking when I began sales training some 15 years ago. I started getting my students, those that work with me and those that I coach, to test this in the right environment. And the environment is this: you're attempting to close. The prospect has shared a few common objections. You want to close this deal now. Your sense is that you can close it. And then your prospect shares with you kind of an odd question, something that's likely intended to throw you off. Procurement people do this a lot, right? They'll give you that question that's intended to make you think you're not going to get the business. But what they're really trying to do is see what else they can get from you before they agree to close the business. So again, the sense is that this is a done deal, that this is going to move ahead, that you're going to close. But then you get an odd question from your prospect. In those situations, what I would suggest you do is use the power pause, which is simply stop and count slowly to anywhere from 3 1,000 to 5 1,000, just like I did. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. And notice I'm not counting out loud. You're counting in your head as you do this. So it's just sitting in silence. And don't stare intently at them, but do continue to look in their direction. What this tends to do is create an environment of discomfort for the prospect. Not extreme discomfort, but discomfort nonetheless. And as a result, there's a chance that they will step in and say a follow-up question, a follow-up comment, which allows you then to continue the conversation rather than you be the one that has to respond. But here's what else it tends to do. When you're silent, what it does is it creates an environment for the prospect such that you may be reconsidering what it is you're offering. So it can create a slight bit of doubt or question in the prospect's mind as to what's Shawn or what are you going to say next? Is this deal dead? Is this not going to happen? Are they going to have more objections? You see, most times when you're trying to negotiate and close with somebody, they want to close, but they're concerned something may come up from your end. So while they're asking for more and raising objections to see how far they can move this forward, they're also concerned that you may change your position. And remember, if you're selling, you're actually in a position of power. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but you are in a position of power because you have what the prospect needs. And if you positioned it correctly, you're going to be in the best position to sell it. But try this power pause in those scenarios. It's a little bit hard to do. You'll want to say something, but use the time as you're counting to think. What is a good response? So not only does it create maybe a sense or a hint of doubt in the eyes of your prospect as far as what you're going to say next, it gives you time to think. It allows you to think, what's a good response to this that will allow me to keep this conversation going? Now, you may say, well, Shawn, this is not something I need to do. It seems kind of odd. It's not really who I am. And that's fine. I'm not suggesting this is for everyone. However, if you like to try new things and you've ever been in a situation where you think everything's going well, and then you get that curveball question or comment that makes you go, what? Try the power pause. It gives you time to think. It casts a little bit of doubt in the eyes of your prospect that you're going to want to move ahead with what you've offered. And ultimately, what it can do for you is position you as somebody that they should respond first. In other words, they'll jump into the silence themselves, say the next thing, make the next comment, which then allows you to carry the conversation on. So it gives you just a little bit of power or control in a situation where you might feel like you have very little. So when the situation arises, try the power pause. It's tricky to do because you'll want to say something, but you'll be surprised at the results. So that's today's 10-minute sales multiplier. Hope you've enjoyed this. Would suggest you test it out and let me know what kind of responses you get or what kind of unique closing strategies have you used that have worked effectively. Comment down below, regardless of where you see this. It's on my YouTube channel. It's on LinkedIn. Just make sure you comment below with your own strategies so we can share these with others. And until next time, let's get out there and go sell something. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.